Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, as always, to the Rav for giving up his time to answer questions for us. Thank you also to Binyamin Lemkin, who I failed to thank last time. Binyamin is responsible for uploading, among many other things, uploading the video recordings to YouTube. So he's the one who makes sure that we see all the recordings extremely soon after the shiurim and Q&As happen. Thank you to Binyamin. The purpose of these Q&As, as I may have mentioned before, is to enable people to follow Torah Eretz Yisrael in practice in their day-to-day lives. So often issues might come up in normal life that someone needs a psak for, and it's not always possible to get a Machon Shilo psak from a local Rav. So this, I believe this really helps people live their lives according to the Rav's teachings. And on that note, I wanted to point out that we are trying to help people get more involved in Machon Shilo on a local level, with the view of setting up local chapters and just helping people to know who everyone else is, and create more activities such as chaburas, shiurim, maybe even minyanim at some point in their local areas. There's a form, a Google form, which is essentially a questionnaire to help us know who everyone is who's involved, who's interested in the Rav's teachings. That Google form, the link to that form appears in the description, the YouTube video description for this video. So I encourage everyone who's watching both live and in recording to take part in that questionnaire. And I'm just going to post that also in the chat for those of you who are, there it is, for those of you who are watching live. We're also trying something slightly new for this session. There's no theme. We will just be, we've just encouraged people to submit questions on whatever halakhic issues have come up in their life for which they would appreciate the Rav's answers. I think everyone knows the rules. Please stay on mute unless I tell you otherwise, except for the Rav, obviously. And we'll move on to the first question, which is from a few people. It's from Meir Morozov in Yerushalayim and Chaim Ginsberg in New York. The question is, how many days of Rosh Chodesh should be observed following a month of 30 days, where the common custom is to observe 2 days?
Let me begin by saying that sometimes I feel that my Talmidim are becoming increasingly clever and knowledgeable, and sometimes their questions, for me at least, are more and more difficult to answer. In other words, some of these questions are indeed very good and very legitimate and profound questions, and I am stating up front that I do not have necessarily for all such profound questions a definitive answer. With regards to this question of Rosh Chodesh, I want to quote briefly from what Rambam writes in Ilchot Kiddush Hodesh Perek Hey. Rambam says in Halacha Zayin, Yom Tov Shel Rosh Halacha Hey, Perek Hey, Halacha Hey, Kiddush HaChodesh. B'zman hazeh she'en sham Sanhedrin. Today, when there is no Sanhedrin, and the Beit Din in Eretz Yisrael is Mekadesh the Hodashim according to the Heshbon, according to the calculation that is known nowadays and for a very long time to all, and therefore there is no safek when a given Yom Tov should be. I'm speaking here about Yom Tov, not Rosh Chodesh, I know, but just give me a moment. It would follow, you would think, therefore, that everywhere on earth, all Jews would observe all Yamim Tovim for 1 day. 1 day, first day Pesach, and 1 day, seventh day Pesach. There will not be a second day, there will not be an eighth day, and so forth through all Hagim. You would think that all places would act like the Jews of Eretz Yisrael and keep only one day, because after all, the original reason for keeping more than one day was because of a safek, not knowing which day had been declared Rosh Chodesh by the Beth Din. But today we have a heshbon. Everyone is following the same heshbon, so there's no room for any doubt. There's no safek. And you would think, therefore, we should be keeping one day. Shakol heshbon ehad somechim v'kove'im. Aval takanat hachamim hi sheyizaharu b'minhag avotehem shebeidehem. However, Rambam says, quoting the famous Talmud Bavli in Masechet Beisa Daf Daled, that there is a takana of the hachamim when this heshbon was first published and began to become more well known, that the Jews in Chutz La'aretz should continue to keep 2 days of Yom Tov. So what has all this got to do with Rosh Chodesh? With regards to Rosh Chodesh, Rambam says in Perek Heth of Ilchot Kiddush HaChodesh, Halacha Dalet, Yom Shaloshim, the 30th day of any month, and keep in mind that a Jewish month, that is to say a lunar month, is in fact 29 and 1/2 days. And because we cannot have a month of half a day, you cannot have Rosh Chodesh occur in the middle of the day, so that the 30th day has to either be counted as part of the former month or part of the month to come. So the 30th day of any given month, says Rambam here, Le'olam osim oto Rosh Chodesh beheshbon zeh. According to this heshbon that Rambam describes here at length, is always considered Rosh Chodesh. Why? How so? Im haya hodesh she'avar haser. If the previous month was a month that should be 29 days, Yeh Yom Shaloshim Rosh Chodesh Haba. The 30th day will then be considered the beginning of the following month. In other words, it will be Aleph, the first day of the following month. But if the former month, the outgoing month, is Maleh, in other words, Shaloshim Yom, because we cannot have a month of 29.5 days, so we have to consider a month to be either 29 days or 30 days. Yeh Yom Shaloshim Rosh Chodesh. Then the 30th day is considered Rosh Chodesh if it's a Hodesh Maleh. Ho'ilu Miksato Rosh Chodesh, because in fact part of that day belongs to the Rosh Chodesh. Part of it belongs to the previous month, the outgoing month, and part of it belongs to the incoming month. But of course, the minyan, the counting of the months, the first day of the following month is from Aleph, from the 31st day, when the month is Maleh. Now, here it is not clear to me whether the standard practice that Rambam mentions here, that we keep the 30th day in a Hodesh Maleh, even though it's considered the 30th day of the outgoing month and not the first day of the incoming month, that we keep it as Rosh Chodesh. It is not clear to me whether this is akin to the takana that was made with regards to Yamim Tovim. In other words, because just as there was a safek in Bavel in ancient times with regards to a Yom Tov, whether it's today or tomorrow, and therefore we'll have to keep both days, the same was also true, it would seem, with regards to Rosh Chodeshim, that frequently they did not know if today was the last day of the outgoing month or the first day of the incoming month, so they had to keep 2 days. So it's not clear to me whether this is really a vestige of Minhag Bavel that is here codified by the Rambam, in which case one could make the argument, well, if it was a takana to this effect, well, takana is a takana, we can't change that. Not for now. When Bezat Hashem we have a Beth Din Gadol, as we should have today, as we should have had for a very long time already, then the Beit Din will be able to, not will, only will be able, it will be required to discuss such things and possibly to change some of these halachot. And not just in this area of halacha, in many areas of halacha, many things will need to be discussed. So if it has to do with the safek that existed in ancient times, but since the adoption of the heshbon there's really no longer any rational, logical reason for this safek. So then the question becomes: was there a takana to this effect, as there was with regards to Yom Tov, or is it simply this is what they did in Bavel because they didn't know? And even when it became the case that they now did know, because they also became aware of the heshbon, of the calculations of the Beit Din in Eretz Yisrael, and they knew exactly which day was going to be the first of the month, they nevertheless maintained their ancient practice and didn't change for reasons of not changing the system, not rocking the boat, things of this nature. This, I admit, is not really 100% clear to me. And therefore, I have never come out in a public manner and been moreh any kind of hora'ah with regards to this question. I haven't said to people, do this or do that. I have a safek, and it's not clear to me really how we should be behaving today. The standard practice is well known, and I'm not saying there's anything incorrect or improper about it. On the other hand, I'm also not sure that if a person does not say Ya'aleh v'yavo on Yom HaShaloshim, which is counted as the last day of the outgoing month, I'm not sure that there's any real problem with that either. That's all I can say on this subject.
Is there any logic to omitting musaf on the doubtful day?
There is some logic to omitting musaf. Obviously, you're referring to the possibility of considering it to be barachot levatala. On the other hand, there is the standard minhag of Am Yisrael, and therefore I don't really think that there's a big issue here of barachot levatala. In the same way that even though it's clear to us that the second day of Pesach, shall we say, or the second day of Sukkot in Chutz La'aretz is not Yom Tov, everyone says Kiddush, and everyone says the Tefillot of Yom Tov, and no one suggests that it is a Bracha Levatala. There is a further reason, so I'm saying I don't think it's a problem to say Musaf, but I'm not convinced that if you didn't say Musaf, you did something incorrect. I could also point out that the halacha in the Talmud Yerushalmi and the view of Rabbi Yohanan and Rabbi Yanai and others of Chachmei Eretz Yisrael, quoted in the Talmud Bavli in Barachot Daf Lamed, the halacha according to those opinions is that the individual is required to say Musaf. Hayahid hayad b'tfilat musafim. But it's also clear, if one learns that sugya correctly, with one's eyes wide open, it's also clear that in Bavel that was not the halacha, that was not the psak halacha. The halacha was, as we find there with Shemuel, who says that he never said Musaf b'yahid, except on a couple of occasions when there was some commotion, there was some invasion of the town by soldiers and military force, and the usual arrangements of Shabbat, of tefillah, etc., were thrown into disarray. And on that day, he had to say Musaf by himself. But every other time, he just listened to the Musaf recited by the Shliach Tzibur, which was the standard minhag in Bavel, based on one of the opinions of the Mishnah, which is, by the way, the standard ancient minhag of the Temanim, many of whom do this to this day. So again, I don't want to say you must say Musaf, and I do not wish to say that you may not say Musaf. Sometimes, with regards to certain questions, more than one answer can be considered correct, at least for the time being. Be'ezrat Hashem, halawai, we should have a change of heart. Am Yisrael should somehow begin to really desire to have a Beit Din should really wish to see kinus shel chachamim in Eretz Yisrael, this would be a tremendous this would be an historic event if it were done properly, and if it would be accepted by increasing numbers of Jews over time in Israel and overseas as well. This would be a tremendous change for the better in Am Yisrael's overall situation. So let us hope that this will take place. B'mihera v'yameinu.
Amen. Chaim, did you have anything to be clarified there?
Yes, one thing, based on what the Rav was saying before, would there be any basis to claim that in Eretz Yisrael, 1 day should be observed and Hus 2 days should be observed, based on that the Rav suggested possibly could be based on a minhag Bavel? So I was curious if that would...
There is that possibility, but precisely because it is not crystal clear to me that that is what underpins this reality of 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. That is it absolutely clear to me that this is a vestige of Minhag Bavel? It's not absolutely clear to me. It seems to me quite possible, yes, but I'm not certain. But there is some logic to what you suggest, yes.
Okay, thank you, Harav. The next question is from a few people, so I won't list them all now. Still on the topic of Rosh Chodesh, should one say a baracha on Hallel on Rosh Chodesh or the final days of Pesach? And if so, in what circumstances? Should one say Hallel at all on these days if davening without a minyan? And what is the correct baracha for saying full Hallel and half Hallel?
All right, let's begin with the second question. Should one say Hallel on those days when half Hallel or Hallel b'diluv is said, when davening without a minyan? There is no chova for the Yahid to recite Hallel at all on those days when Hallel Shalem is not recited. That's exactly what Chazal state, that there are days when the Yahid is Hayav Lirmor et Hallel, and those are the well-known days, 18 days a year. And all other times that Hallel is recited, it is not recited as Hallel Shalem. It is called Hallel B'diluch, and that is not a chovah for the individual. That is a minhag which pertains to the sibur, to the kahal. So if a person is davening alone, he does not have to say Hallel. If he does say Hallel, then he should definitely not say a bracha. That's number one. Number two, with regards to the sibur, the Beth Knesset, how should Hallel be said on these days? It should be, the bracha should be recited, and here I am not following the Shita of the Rambam. The bracha should be recited, but only by the Shliach Sibur, as the Rif writes in Masechet Shabbat, and this was the universal practice of Am Yisrael in all communities and all times, to the best of my knowledge. Rambam claims that seeing that it is a minhag, one does not recite a bracha for a minhag. But without going into all the details of that discussion, in practice, this is not what Am Yisrael has done, and there is a very simple reason for this, as I recently explained, I believe. If you say the prakim of Hallel without a bracha, then you're not saying Hallel, then you're saying Tehillim. Hallel is the act of reciting Hallel, ideally as it was intended by Chazal, to be reciting the Sibur, the Surah Shel Aniyot of responses, the Kahal and the Shliach Sibur, which is not done, unfortunately, usually. And saying Hallel always involves a bracha. There's no such thing as saying Hallel without a bracha. That's not Hallel, just as there's no such thing as reading from the Torah without a bracha. If you read from the Torah, the Sibur, you recite a bracha. As we said in the recent shiur, even if it is not a day when there is a chovah to read from the Torah, perhaps. If a tzibur wants to read from the Torah, they do so, but they have to say a bracha. That's how it works. That is called kriyat haTorah b'sibur. The same is true for haftarah b'sibur, and the same is true for Hallel. So on Rosh Chodesh or Hol HaMoed Pesach, for example, the sibur says Hallel, the shliach sibur says the bracha, only the shliach sibur. And if you're davening alone, then you don't say any bracha at all. With regards to the correct bracha, one could discuss this at length, but we're not going to do that here. At the beginning, the correct bracha, when one recites a bracha for Hallel, for example, on those days when it's a chova to say all of Hallel, I think the more correct bracha is Asher Kiddush Hallel Miswatho, we'll say one will likro et Hallel. Although if one says ligmor et Hallel, it is also acceptable. It's also mutar. It's not wrong, but I do not see any reason to be makpid to differentiate between ligmor or likro, etc. I don't think that's necessary at all. And so therefore the bracha is the same for full Hallel or half Hallel. That is at the beginning of Hallel. With regards to the bracha at the end, there are a number of nusachot minhagim that we find in the Rishonim. The nusach that I use, that I B'ezrat Hashem we will place in the sidur, goes something like this: Yahalalucha Hashem Elokeinu kol ma'asecha v'hasidecha oser rasonecha v'chol amnecha beth Yisrael yahalu yishalchu yifaru, etc. You can add or use more or fewer terms there. Then I say something like Kedushimcha tov lehodot ulezamer tov ki lecha na'im lezamer lehodot l'shimcha b'chol yom tamid umeromam al kol baracha u'teila baruch atah Hashem melech mula b'tishbachot.
Okay, thank you, Harav. Svi, did you have anything to clarify in your question? You can put it in the chat if you want. Okay, so I think just seeing if anyone else that asked that question is Louis on the line. Louis, don't think so. And Benjamin isn't there. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one, which is also from a few people, from Meir Morozov in Yerushalayim, and Yitzhak and Sarah Rietti also in Yerushalayim. Please, if the Rav can explain a little bit about bug checking in fruits and vegetables like strawberries. Are we to consider certain fruits and vegetables forbidden?
Fruits and vegetables that are mutar and all fruits and vegetables are mutar according to the Torah, according to the halacha, to eat, should not be considered forbidden. That's number one. So, therefore, things like lettuce or cabbage and the like, does one have to purchase gush katif or something of that sort? These kinds of vegetables grown in a particular way because of this question of insects? No, I do not think so. I think there's even room to say that there are health reasons that one can quote, that one can mention in this connection, because one of the things that are done to the gush katif type vegetables in order to make them insect free is copious quantities of insecticides, which I think we all know are not healthy. And I do not believe they are all removed either by the producer or when we receive them and wash them. I don't believe that's all of that is removed. And I have read a certain amount about this subject, and insecticides are very harmful in a number of ways, and in fact over time we discover more and more how dangerous they can be. So having said that, how does one check, how does one clean something like a cabbage or lettuce? One can soak them in water with some salt and some vinegar. Break them up into, don't put it in whole, break up the cabbage or the lettuce, etc., break it up into pieces so the water so they're totally immersed in the water. And bugs usually will be killed by, or at least damaged or harmed by the salt and the vinegar and the water, and they will float to the top. And you can see this when there are bugs. You can actually see them. All of a sudden, they appear on the top. They float to the top, very, very often. But they don't always float to the top. So having soaked them in that water for a time, doesn't have to be for hours. 15-20 minutes is sufficient. Then we pour out that water, of course, and thoroughly rinse all of the leaves under the tap, under a jet of water. And one looks at them with one's bare eyes. One looks at them, and anything that is asur according to halakha should be obvious to the naked eye, and if there's a problem, you should see it. And that which you do not see with the naked eye, having looked at it with some care, even if there is some microscopic organism, etc., on the leaf, in my view, that is not asur according to the Torah. That's with regards to things like leafy vegetables. With regards to strawberries, I remember many years ago, when I began hearing talk about strawberries and bugs in strawberries. And I was surprised because I'd never seen any insect of any kind on a strawberry, unless it was something very obvious, something black and creepy crawly and very obvious to anybody. I'd never seen such a thing. And I actually went, I recall, this goes back many years, I actually went to the shuk and I bought 2 or 3 kilo of strawberries, and I brought them home and soaked them in water and looked at them, and I couldn't see anything. And then I cut each individual strawberry into quarters, and I looked at them on the outside and the inside, and I did this with my glasses on, and I even used a magnifying glass, although I don't think you are required to do so, but I wanted to see if I could find anything, and I could find nothing at all. That has been my experience, and that was my experience then, and it has been my experience since. I hear about people who know how to discover all kinds of organisms and all kinds of vegetables and fruits, but I believe the Torah, when it prescribed certain things, it was referring to things that a person, without taking special courses in botany and zoology and microbiology, a person should be able to see these insects, and they should be obvious to the naked eye. Those things which are not obvious to the naked eye, I believe, are not asur. And that's really all that I think needs to be said.
Thank you. Yitzhak, are you on the line, and do you have anything to be clarified there? You can unmute yourself.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Harav. We have a question about broccoli. What do you want to ask about broccoli?
But no, it's in general really infested, so it's
Okay, well, and generally there's some things that we find are very infested. That very often do have bugs in, like broccoli. And I find also dried figs. Sometimes when you buy dried figs in the shop very often, I found many times bugs in them. So would you say
Okay, so
to stay away from certain
with regards to something like dried figs, there is a chova, there is an halachic obligation to check those fruits and vegetables that are muchzakim, kemetulaim. Those things that, as you say, are frequently infested. There you must check. Now, the way to check a dried fig is really very simple. You open it up and look inside. And it's usually absolutely clear if there is a problem with the fig inside or not. Either it looks healthy or it doesn't look healthy. If there are either the worm that you might find there is big and white and very often still moving about, and it's not hard to see, or you can see that it has been infested in the past and it laid eggs or something there, and you can see that it's not right, and therefore you throw it away. So you open up each individual dried fig and you have a look inside. If it looks okay, and you don't see anything that suggests there is or were insects in this fig, then there's no problem. If it looks dubious, then you don't eat it. The same is true for dates and other dried fruits as well. I will tell you that with regards to dried figs, it depends a great deal on where you buy them, how long they've been sitting around, and in what conditions they've been kept. That really is one of the that is the essential question. It is all about how long the figs have been sitting around and how they've been kept, if they've been covered, and if they've been in the refrigerator, if they were stored properly or not. That really determines if you will find bugs in them or not. So you should always try to buy things like dried figs, which there is a certain percentage. It's not 50%, and it's not 20%, and it's not even 10%. But let's say it's 3% of dried figs that you buy, you will find bugs. It is always a good idea to try and buy figs that seem fresh and have been stored properly and do not look like they've been sitting around for a very long time and look somewhat suspect. And to some extent, that depends on where you buy them. To a large extent, it depends on where you buy them. So if you're buying them in the shuk, if you speak to me later, I'll tell you exactly what the person I recommend that I know in the shuk in Yerushalayim, and whenever, if I am passing there and I stop by there, he always has. He says these are fresh, these are new. You can see they look good, and you can tell it's a new batch, and it's also a seasonal thing. But you can usually tell the difference. So always try and buy those that seem that look fresher and not to have been stored for a very lengthy time. But even those that have been, it's not that they're asur. You just have to check them. And checking, as I said, is quite easy. With figs, it's very easy. With dates, it's also very easy. A date that has been infested by some kind of insect and usually laid eggs inside the date, it's obvious immediately upon opening the date. There's no room for question. Certain other dried fruits, rarely you will find in something like dried apricots or something, and those too need to be opened. But again, if there's a problem, it will be obvious to be immediately upon inspection. With regards to broccoli, if you know that a certain kind of vegetable, in those places where you buy it at least, is generally infested and very difficult to clean, then stay away from that vegetable. I believe that there too it can be cleaned if you cut them into small pieces and you soak them in water with salt and vinegar, and you look carefully at them after you take them out of the water. There you have to look more careful. I know there is more of a problem with broccoli, but if you don't want to get involved in all of that, you can buy frozen broccoli, or you can just not eat broccoli.
Okay,
Thank
that
you.
was great.
Yes, hi. Was there anything else that you want to clarify?
No, we were going to ask about broccoli, but he answered it, so that's great. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next question is Mayor Morozov again. What are the actual borders of one's beard, and what number on an electric hair trimmer can one use on one's head?
Okay, there are Hamesh Pe'oth Hazakan. There are 5 points on a man's beard which may not be shaved. Those 5 points are as follows: the bone, where the bone joins the skull here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the chin. Those are the 5 pe'oth of the zakat. There are a number of perushim amongst the Rishonim. What I just said now is what Rambam writes, and it seems to me that's the straightforward understanding of pe'oth zakat. In my view, an electric shaver which removes all of the whisker to the point, to the extent that there's no significant difference between it and a handheld razor, it is asur to use such an electric shaver. I also heard something similar in the name of Rav Ovadia Yosef Zetzal, and also in the name of Rav Eliashiv Zetzal many years ago, that both of them were asked about these things, and they replied that if after shaving with an electric shaver, those parts of the beard that one is not allowed to shave, if one runs one's finger over one's face and one does not feel obviously any obvious bristle sticking out, if one does not feel that, that's considered hashchata. That's considered that the whisker has been removed just as it is with a handheld razor. And keep in mind, of course, that all the manufacturers of electric shavers wish to convince us that we should buy their product because they shave as close as a blade, to quote the advertisements that I recall from my childhood. That is how they advertised Remington shavers and filler shave shavers. They shave as close as a blade. And for all intents and purposes, they do. Just as a very old electric shaver can become rather blunt and not nearly as, doesn't produce the same result as a new one, the same is true for a handheld razor. If it becomes very old and blunt, you don't replace the blade or you don't sharpen it, it also eventually does not produce the same result. With regards to a hair trimmer on one's head, the rule is basically the same. If you leave hairs, in other words, the definition of a hair and a whisker here is the same. If you leave something that is stubble, that one can clearly and easily feel when one runs one's finger over that area, then it's not considered to have been shaved. But if you don't feel such stubble at all, then that area is considered to have been shaved. So with regards to the number, I do not know the number. I suppose it varies from device to device. But the important point is the outcome, the result. If it removes the hair, or the beard, the stubble altogether, so that you do not feel anything left, it's smooth, then that's not good. That it may not be used. Then you have to use a higher number.
Harav, just to clarify, the area here where I'm pointing now, I understood that a lot of poskim say that that had to be at least 5 millimeters in length. Does the Rav have any view on that? Is the Rav saying that even that area can be very short so long as there's discernible hair?
I do not know where this concept of 5 millimeters comes from. I think that what I just explained, that which I also have heard in the name of the Rabbanim that I mentioned, namely that if there is obvious stubble left that one can feel with one's finger when one runs it across that area, that means that there is still something there. Has not been removed, and that is not considered hashchatat hazakat. That is not or the pe'ah. And if that's not the case, then that's a surah.
Okay, thank you.
What that actually means in terms of millimeters, I do not know. Maybe that means 1 millimeter. I'm not sure. I don't know how to measure it. I don't think it needs to be measured. It's something that you can feel and you can see with your eyes.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Dina Martindale in Yerushalayim. What does the Rav hold regarding women wearing jewelry outside on Shabbat, where there is no eruv or the eruv is invalid?
All right, so we know that Hazal were gozer. They disallowed women wearing various jewelry, etc. on Shabbat, Reshut Rabim. The reason being, as Rambam writes here in Chod Shabbat, Perek Yod Toif, Halacha Daled, Rambam writes, Lo teseh isha b'taba'at she'en alea hotham, af al pi shehi mitach shitea. Why would a woman not be allowed to go out wearing such a ring on Shabbat? Shema tosi'ah b'Reshut Rabim, lest she walk out into the Reshut Rabim on Shabbat wearing this ring, laharot lahavrofeha, kederech shanashim osot tamid, lest she take it off her finger and show it to her friends to show them what a beautiful ring she has, which is something that women tend to do, Rambam says, and this is, he's quoting the Talmud and the Mishnah. So this is a gzera midivrei sofarim, and therefore Rambam says, im yasat ba petura. So the act of walking out with such a thing on one's finger is not a sur, because then it's derech malbush, and it's mutar. But there is a hashash that it may be removed and shown in order to be displayed to others, and therefore Hazal made such a gezerah with regards to women. Why not with regards to men? Because men tend not to do this. Rambam says, aval ha'ish mutar laset b'taba'at sheyesh alei chatham mipnei shehu tachshit. It is considered an item of jewelry for the man, wherein darko laharoth, and is not the way of men to remove it and show it to their friends. Rambam adds, but the minhag of all of them Israel is not to wear any kind of ring, Reshut Rabim, on Shabbat. And I think that we should adhere to that minhag of all of Am Israel, which is apparently a very ancient minhag of all of Am Israel. With regards to other types of jewelry, Rambam writes in the following halacha hey. Rambam sums it up and says as follows: Zeh hakalah. This is the general rule. Kol hayoseh b'davar she'eno mitachshito. If a person wears something which is not a tachshit for him, for that person wearing it, we're not derech malbush, and it's not something which is worn, and he walks out with it into the street in the way that it is normally worn or carried, then one is hayav, that is asur. But if a person takes something which is, and goes out into the street with it, which is for him an ornament, some kind of tachshit, man or woman, now if it is something which is loose, it is worn on the person, but it is something that can easily fall off as well, because it is not firmly attached to the body, it's something which is loose and might fall off, then there is a hashash, which is a very obvious hashash, that something will fall off, and the person will pick it up on Shabbat, and that would be a stool. So something which is loose and may fall off on Shabbat when walking outside with it, one is not allowed to wear. This is true for men and women. And something which is a tachshit, which is an ornament, which is an item of jewelry, which is ra'ui, which is fitting for that person. When non-kosher, and it's not something that will fall. When en darka laharotho, and it's not the way of that person to show it to others, hareze mutar lasetbo. And therefore, you could say that if a woman today says about herself, if she knows herself, that it is not my habit to show my jewelry, to remove it in the street and show it to others. And therefore she says, well, I'm like a man, because Chazal said that men don't do it, although a man might do it. It's not impossible that a man might do such a thing. But Chazal did not make the gzerah with reference to men, because the vast majority of men do not do this. And gzerot are not made for unusual cases, but rather for the more usual, the more ubiquitous type of case. So just as there was a difference made here by Chazal between men and women based on the behaviors of men and women that Chazal observed, I think it would be possible to say today that if a woman says, I've never removed an item of jewelry in the street and shown it to another woman to show off, or to ask her opinion of it, or something like that, and therefore I'm like a man when it comes to this, or as men used to be, I can see a valid reason to say it's mutar for such a woman to wear such things. But if a woman doesn't think she can say that about herself, or a man doesn't think he can say such a thing about himself either, for that matter, then it should not be done. Then it's asur.
Would that apply even for rings, which the Rav said was a
with regards to rings?
minhag?
Because with regards to rings, because we are informed by Rambam and others, I don't think that we are able to, or nor should we wish, I think, to undo such a minhag, which is I think a positive thing, because essentially anything that we do or refrain from doing on Shabbat, which reminds us of the fact that it is Shabbat, and causes emat Shabbat liyot aleno, that the feeling, the presence, the awareness of Shabbat should accompany us all of Shabbat. Any such thing is a powerful and very positive thing. This is probably the reason for this minhag, and I don't think that we should do anything to undo such a minhag. So with regards to taba'oth, with regards to rings, no. With regards to other types of jewelry, as I said, for men it's mutar. Women, the zera was that women tend to, there's a much more reason to be concerned about women removing them and showing it to others. But if that is no longer the case, if a woman says, that's not me, I've never done that, I'm never going to do that, then I think that we can consider a man for this purpose.
Thank you. Next question is from Binyamin Lemkin in Ramat Bet Shemesh. Is there a need to check which hechsher a food item has in Israel, and can all be relied upon?
It is definitely necessary to check the hechsher on all food items in Israel and outside Israel. First of all, in Israel today, there are many items which are imported, and one needs to check the hechsher. Number two, in Israel itself, there are hechsherim, and there are places. Don't ask me for names right now, but there are places and there are things which I think it's fair to say one cannot be completely convinced of the level of hashgacha that exists in the production of that particular item. And this, and therefore, what might I be referring? There are many items that if I were to buy them, I would not be 100% convinced that trumot ma'asrot were taken from all the ingredients. So when I'm not convinced, then I take trumot ma'asrot misafek myself. So even if it's something small, you can break off a very small piece, and you can say the nusach for haflashat trumot ma'asrot, for example, without saying a bracha, because it's a safek, because it may have been usar. And and as for the hechsher, I know for a fact that not all hechsherim, not every printed hechsher on every product can one assume this means that Trumat Ma'asrot L'Mashal were taken? Are there more serious breaches of kashrut that go on in the food industry? Occasionally, and sometimes more than occasionally, there are. I think we all heard recently about the tragic case of a young woman who was served a dairy product which she was very allergic to, and she thought she was being served a powder product, as it should have been, because it was supposedly a kasher mahadrin restaurant, and such a thing should never have been served to her after a meat meal by the normal understanding of practices of kashrut. And this is certainly what customers expect when they go to such a restaurant. And she in fact died even from this dairy product because she was terribly allergic to it. The point of that story, of that anecdote, is to point out that there are things that go on in the realm of kashrut that should not happen, but sometimes they do. So one has to check for hechshering, and one should not assume too much.
Are there any rules of thumb that one should follow when it comes to hechsherim? I mean, obviously there are some that just have a stronger brand than others. What's the best way of knowing whether one is good?
I'm not sure there's any way to really answer that question, because it very much depends on what we're discussing. For example, all kinds of sweets, toffees, lollies, what have you, candies. Usually the issue in such things, and the difference between one kind of hechsher and another kind of hechsher, is the source of the gelatin that is used in that product. And with regards to gelatin, there is a machloket amongst the poskim whether gelatin made from the bones of non-kosher animals is mutar ba'achila or not mutar ba'achila. And there are hechsherim that will never give a hechsher to such gelatin, but rather only to gelatin made from kosher animals or made from other sources. There are definitely those who say it's mutar, and very major poskim who say it's mutar, like the Ahi Ezer and others. But there is a mahloket, so that is one of the reasons. So you find these differences. So when it comes to a food stuff like that, then you know really what the argument, what the argument's about. And that's very different from questions such as can you buy meat which is shechted and shipped from South America to Israel? I personally think you can. Some people think you cannot. Why they say this? Not clear to me. Because I'm sure that things can go wrong and sometimes do go wrong in Israel as they do overseas, perhaps as well. I also know that in Chutz La'aretz, with regards to meat, there's less reason, it seems to me, when you have thousands of animals in a place like Argentina or Uruguay. If there's any safek with regards to a behemah, they can just say to the goy, you take this one, we'll take the next one. There's no shortage of behemoth. There's no reason to start searching and checking, and whether it's kasher according to the Bet Yosef or also according to the Ramah or vice versa. There's no need to go into it. You can find any number of behemoth that you like without any kind of sirucha on the lung or what have you. Whereas when you have fewer behemoth to work with, then these questions might become much more acute. With regards to gelatin, the question was asked, I saw. My view is that gelatin from the bones of non-kosher animals which undergo a process which first of all, it is made from parts of the animal which have no no taste or flavor, and the result, the gelatin, is a tasteless, transparent, tasteless, and substance lacking smell and taste, etc. I believe the teshuvah of the Ahiezer Hagaon Agadol Rabbeinu Chaim Ozer Grozhensky, who writes a well-known teshuvah on the subject, and it says it's mutar. I think his teshuvah that I looked at many years ago, went through carefully, it seemed to me his argumentation, his proofs were very convincing, as opposed to teshuvah of Hagaon Rabbeinu Moshe Feinstein Zetzal, who disagreed. It seems to me his proof based on the Rambam is not a very convincing or valid proof. So I think la halacha that various types of gelatin are mutar.
Okay. Thank you, Harav. I think we've got time for one more question, which is from Gabriel Martindale in Yerushalayim. Does the isur of pulling out white hairs because of lo tilbash apply to beard hairs, since women do not have beards? Does it apply at all today, since many men dye their hair?
It is usually understood, I understand why the question is being asked, but it's usually understood that it applies to the hairs of one's beard as well, because the idea is to, well, not look like a woman, but to beautify oneself and to do the kinds of things that women do to groom themselves. And so women don't have beards, and they have hair on their head, and they do this with regards to the hairs on their head, and so might men. But men also do it perhaps with regards to their beards, which is of course why some men dye their hair or their beards. And for that very reason, I think it's asur for a man to dye his hair or his beard, because that is exactly the concept of lo tilbash. And so I think it does apply, and I think it is asur for men to dye their hair or their beards. And speaking as someone with a fair number of white hairs, there's nothing wrong with having white hairs, even if they appear when you are rather young. I can reveal to you all here that the first white hairs in my beard appeared about 2 or 3 months after I got married, at the age of 22. So it's not the end of the world. It's fine. Nothing to be concerned about. It looks very respectable, perhaps even distinguished.
Okay, thank you. Gabriela, you just joined us. I don't know if you heard the question, but no, nothing to add. Okay, thank you. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, as always, to the Rav. I just wanted to remind everyone, as I said at the beginning, to fill in the form, which will help us form some local Machon Shilo activities. And as I mentioned at the beginning, that's also in the link is in the video description for this video on YouTube. And I'm also going to post it again for those who missed it at the beginning in the chat. Thank you very much to everyone, and have a good evening.
Shalom, shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org. If you are inspired by Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to get involved in Torah Eretz Yisrael activities in your local area, please fill out the relevant form by going to the link which appears on the screen.